is Kendra Flood, and I am here today for the Christ-Centered Life podcast, and we have a special guest, Cecelia, with us today. To start, Cecelia, I have 3 big questions that this is how I'm going to start every discussion.
Okay.
And the first one is, where have you been, where are you now, and where do you hope to be?
Okay, so Where have I been? Well, I was raised in a devout Catholic family. Both of my parents are musicians. And that's why they named me Cecelia, actually. They picked out the name on their first date.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, they picked out the name on the first date, and they were like, if we ever have a daughter, we want to name her Cecelia. And 3 breakups later, and an engagement, and a marriage.
Wow.
I came along.
Wow.
So, and it's really funny, like music and family and God were always kind of like the 3 main centerpieces of my life growing up. But I didn't actually want to like do music or like have anything to do with it professionally because of my family. And then the Lord changed my mind when I was in high school through a few different things. Made me open my eyes to like I wouldn't be happy if I didn't do that, like he created me to make music. And so I ended up going to do my undergrad at Catholic University of America. Not entirely because I wanted to go there, though, but because my parents told me that they would give me more money for college if I went to a Catholic school. And because I wanted to major in flute performance, flute being my main instrument, I had one option, and that was Catholic University of America. And so I went there for my undergrad, and I ended up getting a minor in theology, which I added on later on in college because at the beginning of college, I didn't really practice my faith too well. Like I went to Mass on Sundays, but it was very superficial, very surface level. And the Lord had to pry a lot away from me in order for me to rely on him. And probably the most dramatic way he did that was at the beginning of my junior year. Flute had become my identity. Like I was a flute player first, a musician first, and I wasn't rooted in my identity as a daughter of God. And I had all these plans. I wanted to play for an orchestra someday, and maybe teach. And one day it occurred to me that I should maybe let the Lord into my plans. And so I was like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? And 2 weeks later, I was practicing one night, and these 2 fingers on my hand stopped moving, like completely. Wow. And that was really freaky. So I went back to my dorm room, and I went to bed, and I was like, well, maybe it'll be better in the morning. I couldn't even hold a pencil in the morning. Like, I had lost all of my strength in this arm. So I went to the ER, and they tested me for early onset MS because it was so sudden. That came back negative, thankfully. I would not want to have early onset MS, but I had a really severe onset of carpal tunnel.
Wow.
So the Lord was pretty much like, yeah, I have other plans for you, Yeah. And it was, that period of my life was probably the most difficult of my life. I was very lost and very depressed, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish out school. I didn't know what was happening. Yeah. And I really had to turn to the Lord during that time. And he ended up, bringing some incredible people into my life and deepening my faith in him and really just reworking my identity as a daughter of God, flute was not important to that, I mean, it mattered because he made me with that desire to play flute, but that wasn't my identity. So, he really reworked my heart during that time. And it was during that time that I ended up picking my minor in theology, and that ended up being just such a beautiful addition. I wish I had majored in, done a double major in it, but at that point I couldn't add it on, so you had to finish deciding by the end of your sophomore year. So the minor was the second best thing. And so then towards the end of college, I was getting ready for, well, what next, And really at the beginning of my senior year, and I was not sure if my plan before had been to go to grad school for flute. And And at this point, the carpal tunnel had been a lot better, but now I had tendonitis in both of my arms, and so it was still really painful. And at this point, I felt almost a resentment towards music because music by nature is very emotional. There's a lot of emotion attached to it. And when, making music is physically painful, like that it can really build up resentment and bitterness almost. And so, I was just not sure what I was going to do. And I remember just spending a lot of time in adoration that first semester of my senior year. Like, what do I do? I looked at doing a master's in library science. Like, I was like exploring options of, a year of service. I felt the Lord be like, it's okay to like look at doing your master's in flute, like keep that on the table. It's okay. And I remember I auditioned for schools, and one of them being Penn State. And the flute professor here at Penn State, I knew her before, and she really wanted me to come here for my undergrad. And I didn't, obviously. But so she was still interested in having me as a student, even though I was injured. And so I auditioned here and a few other places. I was preparing applications for a year of service, and I really just told the Lord, I was like, if you want me to go to grad school for flute, you have to give me like a full ride with a stipend and a teaching assistant position, all that. And a couple of days later, I got a text from the flute professor here saying she wanted me to offer me an assistantship. So I was like, all right, there's my answer. So, and then that's how I ended up at Penn State doing my master's in flute, which I'm finishing this spring. And I will be, after this year, I'll be teaching music. I can't really do so much performance because of my hands. They're still not the greatest. But I've developed a deep love for teaching and passing on the gift of music to others because, it's a gift that God gave to me. And so through teaching, I can pass that gift on to other people. And so I'll be doing that next year. And I also, through my carpal tunnel, I discovered that I really love writing music as well. So I'm looking into, kind of building up somewhat of a career as like a composer. And then I also have a small business where I make veils for Mass. Veiling was something that I was introduced to at CUA. And I always thought it was so beautiful. That's something to know about me, is the Lord like draws me to him through beauty. And so I saw all these like young women veiling at Mass, and I just thought like, this is so beautiful. But I put it off for like 2 years because I'm lazy and a procrastinator. But eventually like the Lord was like, you should start veiling again. And so I did. And then I discovered that I really like making them too. My grandma taught me how to sew when I was 5, and I've always enjoyed creating through that medium. And so I started making veils, and I started selling them online, and my small business has really taken off. So that will be a viable source of income for me as well. So I'm going to have this really great freelance career after grad school, and just, infusing everything I do with God. And, it's just so good.
That is so awesome. That is so good. I just want to like backtrack so you've talked about where you've been, where you are now, and where you hope to be. So you went to a Catholic university, you're at Penn State now, and you're almost done. But I want to backtrack to that. Where have you been? So you did go to a Catholic university. I'm very jealous. I didn't know I wanted to go to a Catholic university until I'm graduating with my master's. But it looks like that's when your faith got more serious. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I had moments like before that in high school. I always went to the Steubenville youth conferences every summer. And so there would always be a spark, you know, but the friends that I had weren't really into their faith so much, and if they had one at all. And so, the spark just really always died. So, it really wasn't until college and the Lord had to use a lot of things, to really even in a Catholic college setting, like get me to, develop a relationship with him.
That's really, really awesome that he did, though.
Yeah.
How was it like going from CUA to Penn State? Going from a very Catholic-rooted university to a secular college?
Well, in some ways, in terms of like being in a music program, there were not so many differences, because a lot of people at the music school at CUA weren't necessarily there for the faith aspect.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too different in one sense. However, I will say that, you know, the Catholic Church has played a tremendous role in the development of music.
Yeah.
To the point where, like, you know, your favorite pop song, you can trace it, like, how it's created. You can trace it all the way back to the monks at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, the musical tradition there. That's when they thought, oh, instead of like having, you know, music on a single line, let's combine lines and like have, you know, multiple things going on at once. Yeah. So there's this just rich tradition of music in the faith. And I know this is not just happening at Penn State, but it's happening everywhere in secular schools where they're trying to erase, you know, what the Catholic Church has contributed to the history of music, which you can't really do, you know, if you pull that away. Yeah. And even just, you know, the role Christianity in general has had on music, because after the Protestant Reformation, the Lutheran Church had a huge part to play in the development of music as well, and that's also being attacked. When you pull all of that away, you're left with nothing with music and the foundation of it. So I think it's going to backfire. But it's been really sad to see that. Just in different, like, you know, papers I've had to read for class discussions and stuff like that. And there's always this feeling that I can't really talk about my faith, you know, in a class setting, whereas at CUA, you know, you freely could talk about the faith, and that was just so nice, you know.
Yeah, that's something I also miss. Our viewers, I think you know that I'm a grad student at Penn State as well, and I feel the same way. It's more difficult to share how that all relates. So, yeah, working through that and just knowing you and knowing your family, how has it been having to balance that family, friend, faith, and studies rule? Because it sounds like at CUA, even though it was a Catholic university, your studies trumped Christ, you know? So how have you been able to find a balance among all of that?
You know, I don't think I ever really have truly found a balance.
We all struggle.
Yeah, the Lord has been really opening my eyes lately to my priorities aren't always in the right order. It's been interesting, especially with grad school, because I live with my grandma and my family's in town, so it's not like in college where it was like, oh, I should call them once a week and see how they're doing. Yeah. Although I definitely called my mom more than that. She and I are besties. Yeah. So yeah, it's that's been like an interesting extra factor that I think a lot of grad students don't have. You know, your family being right there. And, like, you know, I live with my grandma, like I said, and my family is literally 2 houses away. So they're always over, my younger siblings, because they're homeschooled. Like, they'll come over, and I'll be like, oh, hey, like, you know. And my sister will be always texting me in the evening, being like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm practicing, or, like, you know, making veils, or, like, you know, I really wanted to pray a rosary tonight. And she's like, can't you come over and watch TV with me? And I'm like, okay, fine, you know, and then it's just like everything gets out of order and stuff. So it's always a struggle, but it's always, you know, just, I think it's just, it's always important to just go back to the Lord with everything and just go from there, you know, because he can help us reorder things much better than if we try to do it on our own, I think. And there is a model that I always think of. I took a class when I was doing my theology minor. It was on moral theology and ethics. And my professor was always drawing on the chalkboard these triangles. And it was a model for priorities. And basically, whatever you put at the top of the triangle is your idol. And everything else falls under there. And if God isn't the one at the top, then that whole triangle is just going to fall apart. It's going to be pretty much like flipped upside down, you know? And so I always kind of think of that as like a visual model for like, okay, how should my life be ordered? God at the top, and then, you know, everything flowing from there.
Yeah, that's really good. That makes me really reflect. I was sharing with you before that I've been working through this book for Lent, and they asked that of like, what are you idolizing more than your salvation? And it's so convicting of, is Christ really at the top? You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really good. And now, you know, you've talked about where you've been, so hopping to where you are now, you're working on that balance still, but you've added something more. You don't just do music. You shared that you also now have a veiling business. And when I re-entered the Catholic Church, I noticed you very quickly. I shared that with you. I was like, wow, this girl is awesome, and I really wish I was like her. And part of it was veiling. I'd never seen it before. I don't know what it is. I didn't understand how. So could you tell us, what is veiling?
Yeah. So it's a practice for women in the church. Sorry, men.
No veils for you.
No veils for you. But it's basically, I mean, it's changed through history. Like my grandma, for instance, remembers prior to Vatican II, it was mandatory for women to have a head covering in church.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh my
and
gosh.
It goes back to, there's a passage in one of St. Paul's epistles about like women should have their heads covered, you know, or whatnot. Which really, when you actually take it and you pull it apart and you look at it in historical context, it has to do with the culture of that particular city that he was addressing. And, you know, it's not necessarily something that has to be applied, you know, broadly. But the church always took that and was like, you know, for a long, 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 long time, you had your head covered when you were in church. And so my grandma remembers, like, in the 50s and the 40s, like, women would wear hats, you know, so, and, you know, before that would be like, you know, maybe like those little babushkas that you see like on Russian grandmas, you know, and like, you know, any variety of like head coverings. If you were wealthier, you know, you would have a lace head covering, you know, and that's kind of really what's made a comeback now, as more young women are discovering the old traditions of the church and seeing like, hey, that's really beautiful. You know, even though that's not mandatory anymore, like, I want to do that. Yeah. So the lace head covering thing has really been making a comeback. And that's what drew me in first, because just seeing just the beauty of, you know, the patterns in the lace and against the hair. It's very striking, you know. And like you said, it pops out, especially in a church where it's only like, you know, 3 or 4 people doing it. You know, it's interesting. I had a friend in college who she started veiling, and then she realized that she needed to stop veiling because it became a source of pride for her. Because she was like, you know, like, look at me, I'm doing, you know, this like really good thing, you know. And so she actually had to stop veiling. And I have the opposite thing where I don't like sticking out, and so it's actually like it's a source of humility for me wearing a veil at mass. I have to like make myself do it, even though it's so beautiful. But I feel very convicted that's where the Lord has called me to, is to, you know, to pick up this tradition. So that's kind of the history of it, though.
Yeah. So why do you do it now? Like, why are you still doing it? Because you did say it took about 2 years to get there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first part is that the Lord really just, one day I was at Mass, and I had received communion, and I was, you know, I was praying, and I just felt the Lord be like, so, why haven't you started veiling yet? And I was like, oh. Gotta do it. Gotta do it.
You don't want to stick out. It's,
Yeah. Because especially at Our Lady of Victory, it was just, you know, it would have been easier for me to start at college because probably about like a good 1/3 of, you know, the women there would wear a veil at Mass. And, you know, it would have been a lot easier for me to start then. But no, I started at Our Lady of Victory, which was hard. But it was very, very worth it. So that was like my personal call to veiling. But there are broader reasons for why women will veil, aside from the historical, you know, context and the beauty of the tradition. You know, the tabernacle itself is a veil. And it veils Jesus, you know, when it's not Mass or, you know, Eucharistic adoration. You know, he's veiled behind that tabernacle. And as women, we have the unique capability to bear life within us, and that's sacred capability to bear life within us. And Jesus is the bread of life. You know, he's the source of life. So when we veil, it's an imitation of Jesus as the source of all life, who allows himself to be veiled when it's not Mass or Eucharistic adoration. So
that's so good. I like got goosebumps from that.
I always get goosebumps when I think about it. It's so beautiful, you know?
Yeah, that's really, really cool, because something I'd shared with you before, we've talked a little bit, is the importance of knowing why we're doing something. You know,
my goodness,
within the Catholic Church, a lot of us, you know, we might have grown up with the Catholic Church, but we don't actually know the true understanding of why we do it. We just do it because we're told we're supposed to do it. And so I went to you and I was like, what is veiling? Because I want to wear a veil, but I'm not going to wear it until I truly understand what it is. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Like, why is it significant?
Yeah,
so
that's so important. Like, you know, the Lord wants us to know why we do things. You know, he doesn't want to keep us in the dark.
No.
He gave us brains for a reason.
yeah, that's so good. So then I wanted to ask, what does veiling look like for you now? Because now you don't just wear veils, you also make them and promote them and share them, and they've changed your life. Yeah,
I mean, the veil company I run, AveMariaVeilCo, my business model is that every veil I make is completely one of a kind. I do not make another one like it. People sometimes will ask me for replicas of veils, and what I do is, like, I'll use the same material and style, but I'll choose, like, a different trim for along the edge.
Okay, yeah.
So every single one of my veils is just completely one of a kind, and the reason I do this is because I have always been really drawn to the idea of how we're all made in the image and likeness of God. Yeah. And yet, we all reflect him so uniquely. Like if you were to think of, like, you know, looking at a diamond, how there are different facets, you know, each facet reflects, you know, light, but in a different way. Yeah. And you can almost think of God as like an infinite diamond, maybe. Like, I know that's kind of like weird to think about, but like, you know, and we all reflect a different facet of him, and you know, only you can reflect that facet that you were created to reflect. Like, nobody before you, nobody currently now, and nobody in the future will ever reflect that same facet of God that, you know, you do. And I wanted to reflect that in my veils. So that's what my business model looks like. And whenever I make veils, I, at the very least, will offer up the creation of that veil as a prayer for the woman who will receive that veil. Yeah. I pray for her vocation, whether, you know, she's discerning it or she's in it already. I pray for her needs. I pray for the desires of her heart, you know. Yeah. A lot of times I'll pray rosaries when I'm, like, I'll put a recording of the rosary on and, like, say it along while I'm sewing. Sometimes I'll put on Bible in a year or something like that instead. But at the very least, like, I always offer up the creation of it as a prayer. And I try to be as in, you know, going with that theme of the Imago Dei, being made in the image and likeness of God. I try to be very, very intentional with creating these veils, and I try to really invite the Holy Spirit in. And so I release veils in collections.
I saw your Lent one, and it went away so fast.
Oh,
like,
my goodness.
It sold out so fast.
It was crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I was like, you know, just like looking at the notifications on my phone, like with the Sell on Etsy like app, you know, I'm just like, I ended up doing 2 parts of my Lent collection, and the first part sold out 6 veils in 4 minutes, and I was like, oh my goodness, I think I need to start making more. Yeah. So I'm getting ready to release my Easter collection on Saturday, and there are going to be like 20 veils in this. That's awesome. So I have 11 of them made, so I have a lot of work to do.
That's so awesome.
But yeah, so I pick a theme for each one, and I really pray with that. And with, like, the Easter collection and the Lent collections, and I also did this with my Christmas collection, I based it off of a passage of scripture. Yeah. So with Easter, it's all going to be from, like, the Easter narratives, you know, or parts of the epistles that talk about Christ rising, you know, and stuff. With Lent, I took it from the readings at Mass, both from the ordinary form and from the extraordinary form, because, you know, the women that buy veils for me, some of them go to Latin Mass, some of them go to the Novus Ordo, so I wanted there to be, like, you know, an equal representation there. Other ones that I do, I've done like one on American saints. So I did like one for St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, one for St. Catherine Drexel, you know.
That's awesome.
St. Kateri Tekakwitha.
That's my saint name.
Oh, that's awesome. I was baptized at a church named after her.
Wow, that's
so
cool.
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I love St. Kateri. She's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there was that collection. I've done one just recently. I did one on the Marian evangelical virtues. There are 10 of them.
Wow.
Can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but like Mary most faithful, Mary most prudent, Mary most pure. There are 10 of these, and so I really worked with that. And I'm going to be doing a St. Therese collection later this year. And a Sacred Heart collection. So it's just all like lots of intentionality, and it's just become such a gift to make these, you know. And the Lord's just blessed me so much through this. It's almost like partly a ministry as well as a small business, which has been so beautiful. Yeah. And you know, I hope that I can continue to do this for a while. Yeah. So I have plans for expansion. I've started getting requests for wedding veils, which has been so special. I'm making one right now for this one woman who wanted one based off of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So it's going to be this gorgeous cathedral veil with gold stars across, and
that's awesome.
I'm so excited.
If you guys, I know you guys can't hear, but our producer and my co-host Mark, they're in the background, and Mark was like, just like, wow. And I know you said the Sacred Heart collection. I immediately thought of Mark because the longer we do this podcast, you'll know that he loves Sacred Heart.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
Sacred Heart is so good.
He's going to be very jealous because you can't wear
You can't wear a veil.
But, yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's really great.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I feel like it has become a ministry for you, just listening to you every week talk about it at a small group and what it's done for you and the way that you get to talk with these women. I think it is a great way of building ministry as well. So
yeah, it's been so cool.
Yeah.
One more cool thing I forgot to mention that I do is I have this thing that I've called the Holy Spirit option.
Oh, wow.
And what I've done with it is you pay a flat fee of $50 which is the average price for a custom order. Mm-hmm. And you put in some devotionals that you have, like, you know, say you really love Saint Martha, or like, you know, you just did the consecration to Saint Joseph, or, you know, like, or what draws you to the Lord. Is there a hymn that you really love, you know, all that sort of stuff. You put all of that in. And what I do is I take it to prayer. Wow. And then I create a veil based on those things. Wow. And they don't know what they're getting until they get it in the mail, like, you know, a few weeks later. But that
is so cool.
But it's been real. That I think has been my favorite part of doing these, because it's just so cool to just like pray with these and just like design things, just like run with what the Holy Spirit is like. Hey, you should try this, you know. So
that is so cool. That's really awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, where you've been, where you are now, where you hope to be, and just how veiling, what it is, like why you do it, why you did it, why you started in your business. And before we go though, if you could tell everyone where they can find your veils.
Yes. You can find them at AveMariaVeilCo on Etsy.com. So yeah. Like I said, I have plans for expansion. I'm going to be expanding to hair accessories in general, which are not always all going to be like one of a kind, but that would be a little tricky to do. But the veils will always be one of a kind. But so I'll be expanding that very soon. And so even if you don't veil, you can find you'll be able to find like saint themed scrunchies and stuff soon. So
and where can they find you on Instagram?
Yes, AveMariaVeilCo on Instagram, and then I also have another one, Missionary of Beauty, which is my personal account. So, and that's also a ministry of mine, but we can talk about that another day.
Yes. Oh, we're definitely gonna have you on again. But
awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who's listening. You have been listening to Kendra and Cecelia, and we are gonna be signing out. I hope that this podcast really helps you have a more Christ-centered life and that you have a very blessed day. Thank you. Like, share, subscribe, and follow us. You can find us on The Salvation Group on Instagram, Facebook, and you can also find us here on YouTube with the Christ-Centered Life podcast. And again, we can't wait to see you guys next week.